Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard China talk a lot about how they want to be the world leader and everything from social, economic, military, even in the space realm. And I think that's where I want to kind of start out with Mr. Watney and Mr. Kratsios. Although China does lag behind the U.S. on AI capabilities, you know, the Chinese Communist Party is spending billions on industrial policy to accelerate innovation and workforce development. Can you both elaborate on how Congress can leverage the government's unique AI assets to establish effective public-private partnerships to keep us ahead of the Chinese?
Thank you, Representative. Great question. I think I'll start by returning to sort of the cybersecurity point that I mentioned in my testimony, but between the Department of Commerce and sort of the larger national security community, we've been engaged in sort of a series of pretty robust and sophisticated export controls on top AI chips to try to prevent China from achieving kind of state-of-the-art models and make sure that the United States maintains its technological leadership. But I'm quite concerned if those are not complemented by very strong kind of cybersecurity standards. In some sense, on the back end, you can still end up losing your model development just as easily as you can on the front end. So I think that's going to be point number one. Point number two is that we should definitely leverage the fact that the United States has this huge, dynamic, open ecosystem for innovation. Ultimately, the United States is willing to work with democracies all around the world. We have always been the home for global talent from all around the world, and that's enabled us to kind of be a pivotal leader in innovation. China does have sort of a more closed innovation ecosystem, and I think we should make sure to leverage that. And one thing I know has been a part of discussions before in, say, the Chips and Science Act is greater opportunities to allow STEM PhD students from around the world who are studying at U.S. universities to be able to stay here and make sure that we're sort of strengthening our ecosystem that way.
I think there's two ways to approach it. You have to take both a promote and protect set of policies to kind of ensure, in my opinion, this American leadership in artificial intelligence. On the protect side, I think Caleb made some really good points. And I think, so I applaud the Commerce Department for the efforts they made in sort of re-upping and improving the export controls that came earlier this week. But I think on the promote side, something that's very important to stress is that the United States has a very unique free market approach to innovation, and it's markedly different than the way that the CCP attempts to challenge these issues. And I think the strength of the U.S. system is that we allow this free market approach to have certain ideas ultimately succeed, and other ones that are ideas that you never thought could ever succeed or would be the answer ultimately are. So in some sense, I think we have an advantage in that sense, and our free market approach is we will win ultimately because of it, not in spite of it. I think just one small anecdote about China, which I think is fascinating on the large language model front, is one inhibitor they have to their large language model development is their strict sort of approach to censorship. They essentially have mandated to all of our language model developers, as one analyst put it, to make sure that their models can't even count to 10 because 8 and 9 are in sequence and you're not allowed to talk about 1989. So they have a number of challenges that they themselves have to deal with in attempting to get these models to conform with some of their absurd authoritarian approaches.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bender, in your testimony, you speak about AI identifying and classifying people through text and images, and also the risk of surveillance and oppression. With the ability of foreign-owned companies like TikTok to leverage AI against the American people, what safeguards need to be put in place and to protect us from our adversaries?
Thank you. I think we have an opportunity here to set standards for protecting personal individual freedom around, what does it mean to have control over one's own data? What does it mean to have control over how we are represented online? And if we set those regulations for, software that's used by U.S. citizens or software that operates in the U.S., then we can take a leadership role there and do so in a way that reflects American values.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.